This is a D6 generation pip. Bite-sized content for a busy gamer. Sometimes featuring Craig, sometimes featuring Russ.
Hey, what about me?
Oh yeah, and sometimes featuring Rafe, Hollywood Granger.
Hey, and welcome back to another Pip. And this time I am super excited, more than thrilled to have a special guest with us today, John. I just want to call you Yakface. I feel compelled because it's your DACA handle. How you doing today, John/Yakface?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being on. Now, for listeners who don't know, I've known John virtually for many years. John, how many years is it now since we've been communicating online? I don't even know. It seems like a lot.
Well,
30?
Yeah, I mean, 2007 is when I bought DACA from you. So, and I know we corresponded a bit before then because I was a mod on DACA before that.
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking about even just when you started to be a mod on DACA, which was like 2004 or 5, something. I don't know. Getting close to 20 years. So I would put you in the good old friend camp. I hope you'd say the same. But yes, so but yes, John was brave enough, bold enough, foolish enough, how you want to categorize it, to when my kids were at the age that John's kids are now, actually, I guess. And I was just like, I need to, I'm not putting as much time into DAC as I should. I put it up, and John was kind enough to both pay me money, but more importantly, take DACA to the next level and get it out there and get people excited about it again and fire it up. And it's kept it going as sort of one of the primary hubs for miniature gamers, DACA.com, to go check out, talk about their latest hotnesses, the latest miniature games. But also, John, one of the things that sort of blew me away is you were just sort of taking the whole website and also miniature gaming in general. For those who don't know John well, in addition to all his DACA work, John, you did a bunch of the rules development and curating the official for 40K tournaments and things like that. All the I want to say house rules, but they were sort of more than that, right? It was sort of the global rules for tournament play in 40K back in the day when those were really a key part of making the game a fun and competitive. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, to a degree. And back before Games Workshop was doing, all their regular FAQs they do now, we tried to make sort of a FAQ document specifically for tournaments that anyone could pick up and use, not to be forced on anyone, but just they could use. It was called the INAT FAQ.
INAT, that's right. And that was fantastic. And I think what got me really excited when John mentioned to me, I don't know, it seems like it was 2015 when you guys started working on your own miniatures game. And you were thinking about, because I just knew how passionate you were about clean, concise, good rule set for both casual play, but also could be taken to a tournament. And so I was super excited when you started working on the product Maelstrom's Edge back in 2015. Is that the right year? Do I have that right?
Yeah, the Kickstarter was in 2016, I believe, but we started working on it, I think, actually a few years before that, but you probably wouldn't have heard about it until 2015 at the earliest. So, yeah,
that's right. Yeah, because I'm sure it's been a long time from your perspective. But so what's so just for folks who are new, and the reason I'm excited to talk to you about this today is, you launched this thing back in 2015, and now it's time for version 2, and you guys the game's grown quite a bit. There's more factions now. There's more miniatures now, and you guys are getting ready to iterate on the mechanics. And I would love the opportunity to talk to you about this today a little bit. What's sort of for those who aren't familiar with Maelstrom's Edge, what's sort of the elevator pitch, like the 30-second overview of this miniature game? Why should people be excited and interested about it?
Well, it's a squad-based skirmish. What we mean by that is you still have squads like in 40K, but they behave kind of more like skirmish models do in a skirmish game. And it's science fiction, and it's a little bit more hard sci-fi than something like fantasy 40K, sci-fi fantasy. And it's set in a universe where there's a giant expanding destructive ball that's wiping out the galaxy very, very slowly. But that has created all sorts of, issues with refugees and just everyone's dwindling resources, and it sort of creates the drive for conflict. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, makes sense. That's awesome. And so, what is sort of if you had to describe the mechanics in like a really short sort of paragraph or short description, sort of like, is it? I think I remember. I'm kind of trying to remember the version 1 mechanics that I got a chance to play with back in the day. It was alternating activation, really D6 focused with different tiers of mission objectives. And the part I always thought was super cool was the suppression mechanic, right? So I love a good morale system, but more importantly, I like suppression is sort of a key part of that. Am I describing the game right from a mechanics point of view? Is that pretty much
that's perfect? Yeah, alternating activation, major focus on suppression, and small squads of 1 to 6 models, and that's the key, really.
And what's typically the model size per side? Is it like, do I have 30 models on a side, 50 models on a side? Like, what?
So you're aiming for like a 20 to 40 model force. We do have we have one elite faction that's you're probably only going to have 3 to 5 models in your entire force. They're kind of like, if you ever played Necromunda, they're like the
right.
the Hive Lord gangers, whatever they were called, the dudes that have all the powerful armor. It's kind of like that sort of feel on a tabletop. And then you have on the other side, you have the broken, which are the sort of like destitute scavengers, aliens mixed together, and they're the closest to a horde we have. And so you'll have a little bit more on that side.
Oh, nice. Okay. Very cool. So sort of where is the game now from a point of view of like, obviously it's grown a lot. You're still using, obviously, I assume sort of the version 1 rule set with maybe an FAQ or 2. How are the factions grown? What are we looking at now for total factions?
So we have 4 factions currently, with a 5th one to be released sometime this year. So I think we're doing pretty good on factions. Now a decision was made, which I still think is the right decision, which is to keep only rules out there for models that we have made, rather than making, a complete sprawling rule set, but then 70% of the models aren't stuff that we make.
Got it.
So that does have a limiting effect on, how many units there are for each faction, because I'm sure we'll get into later, we don't produce like model kits on the same speed that, your typical companies
larger companies, right?
Exactly. So we put them out at the pace that we can put them out, and that means that things grow slowly. So some of the factions only have a few different unit choices, but I still think we've managed to make pretty interesting forces, even with those factions that only have a few units. And any day we can add a few more units to each faction and make it a little more interesting. So.
And is it pretty easy? How do you guys do like the rules for each unit? Are they cards? Do you do, is it an app? Is it just an online, you print it out? Like, so if you decided tomorrow, like, hey, we can create one more unit for the broken, for example, how would that manifest itself? Would you need to produce a whole new book, or would it just be like a card in the unit coming out?
So in the original Kickstarter, we had unit cards for every unit. And, the goal was, when we come out with new things, we're going to print more cards. Well, printing cards turned out to be a logistical nightmare.
Right.
It's hard to say, like, it seems so simple, but it's just not. So we quickly pivoted to an online system. We do not have an app yet. That would be lovely to have. But right now we just have the rules online on our website, and then you can essentially print those, and if you want to, and use them to have on your tabletop or play side by side. And the version 2, we're aiming to have them more of like a full page unit that has all of its rules, kind of like 40K 8th and 9th edition does. And that will be the aim. You could just print out a page of paper and then put it in a, like a binder sitting next to you, and just have, if you like the printed stuff, rather than just going on the website on your iPad or something.
Nice. So give me the quick, whet my appetite. Give me the quick, I do want to talk about the new rule set, and we'll get there in a second, but give me a quick like overview of each of the 4 factions. I know there's one called the Broken, which I love, because whenever I pick up a new miniature game, sometimes some of my friends are like, they want to go right to the cheesiest faction. And so they're like, let me play the most broken faction. And I love it, because in Maelstrom, then you'd be like, well, how about the broken faction?
Yeah, there you go.
So what are the 4 factions, and sort of like, what's sort of the theme and play style of each, if you could briefly?
Absolutely. So you have the Aperian Foundation, which is sort of like the corporate, robotic corporate guys. Mm-hmm. And they were originally terraformers back before the Maelstrom erupted, making new worlds. And they had all sorts of industrial robots. And since the Maelstrom happened and all the conflict has broken out, they have pivoted and converted a lot of their previously industrial robots into war robots. And so they use things, they have guys called bot handlers, and they're basically humans that can project their consciousness for a short amount of time into the robots. And so they sort of lead the robotic units or from a distance, and then every now and then can sort of like, send a special rule over to the robot units to help them do better than they normally can. So that's really the main focus of their play style, is like robotic units that each have their own specialization based on where they were originated from. So you have your crop duster, flyer units, and you have your sentry guard sniper. And if you have a bot handler nearby, you can boost their abilities to make them perform that role even better.
Fun. That sounds cool.
And they also have what's called SecDef, which is their security and defense force, which are their human forces that are sort of like their high-end forces. Mm-hmm. And these guys have a chip on their shoulder because the Foundation overlords, tend to not want to have human forces because it doesn't sell their products very well to have like their best forces be humans. So the SecDef basically refuse to use any robots when they're doing their own pure force. And so they're sort of like anti-robot despite being in the robot force. And then finally, there's the contractors, also part of the Aperian Foundation, which are, lowly humans that are contracted out, and they'll be supported with a robot or two in their unit to help them perform a little better, but are otherwise like lowly grunts. And so that's the core of the Aperian Foundation forces. And then the other force we had in the Kickstarter was the Karist Enclave, and they're essentially the religious fanatics, if you want to call them. And they believe that the Maelstrom is a force to help ascend humans to a higher level of consciousness. And as long as you believe hard enough, when you die, you'll get ascended up into the Maelstrom. And so while everyone else is trying to escape the Maelstrom, they're flying in and destroying people's ships to make them stay.
You got to have a good religious zealot in your game.
Yeah, exactly. So that's them. and they kind of have their military arm, which is pretty much, they're just high tech, and they use the energy of the Maelstrom in their guns. But they also have sort of trapped and trained this weird alien species called the Angels, which are a spaceborne creature, and they've forced them to work for them, and they use them as sort of a proof of their dominance and their connection with the Maelstrom.
Oh, wow. So like slave angels. That's awesome.
Correct. And so they have the military, they have their priests, which we're finally getting some priest models out, which is, one of the problems we had with, like, they just kind of previously looked like a military, like kind of space marine-ish force, but we're finally starting to get some nice priest models sprinkled in there to give that element of the religious fanatics. And then we have the angels to give them a little alien flavor as well.
Nice.
So those are the Kharis. And then we have the Broken, which you love the name, and they are they are the rabble and the forgotten and the left behind. And essentially, all the rich people are able to escape the Maelstrom, and that just leaves behind all these other, poor alien species and humans. And a lot of times those people have no other option, but they band together and attack spaceports and steal spaceships. And they eventually end up without a planet, without a home. And they come together and live in asteroids and anywhere else they can find, and essentially take up piracy and will attack anywhere they can to keep themselves going. And they obviously are an advocate to try to save other people from the Maelstrom too. So they'll fly in and attack people that are trying to abandon, large chunks of humanity and stuff like that. So
nice. Are they cheesy enough for their name?
Well, still working on that to make them properly cheesy. But I mean, their whole thing is they're supposed to be like sort of like stealthy. Cool. Their statistics, all their characteristics are incredibly poor, and their weapons are either not very good, or if they are good, then on a roll of 1, you get suppression on your own unit as the weapon malfunctions.
That doesn't sound very broken, John.
But wait, I'm getting to the good part.
Okay.
They have by far the most weird effects, so they can.
Good. So these are guys that break all the normal rules. That's right. Perfect.
So they can, they can confuse the enemy. You're allowed to, if you have a unit in cover, you're allowed to pull them off the table and then make them reappear somewhere else in cover.
Wow.
Turn. So they're able to jump around the table and cause havoc and trigger booby traps and do stuff like that. So
I love it. That does sound broken. I love it. Okay, great. They've redeemed themselves.
They're chaotic. They're individual guys. They're not very powerful. That's all.
Got it. Okay.
And then on the opposite side of that is the Artarian Remnant, and they are the fleet-born, super high-tech gladiator guys who love to fight in combat for honor. And on their own ships that they live on, they have these giant mech suits that they do gladiatorial games against each other, and everyone watches and cheers. And so when they come to a planet, their gladiator teams, drop down to the planet and engage in combat. And you'll have, a handful of guys against a whole other faction. And meanwhile, everyone on board the ship is watching on the TV screens and like cheering along and placing bets and stuff like that. So they have rules, representing like how the crowd is pumping them up and making them perform better. And they're, besides having, great skill and all their weapons have these great abilities, you can also use your command points, which there are command points that you generate each turn, and you can overcharge the suit, make it go faster, beef up its defenses, or make its guns shoot more. So you're able to like target where you need the extra juice and put it there.
Nice. Well, that sounds awesome. It's like there's a lot of great variety in the factions, and it sounds like the only thing really missing is just you want to make them a little broader each. But it sounds like you get some nice, cool uniqueness in each of those. That's great. That's fantastic.
Absolutely. And so the sneak peek, the Kaigas Pact is the new faction that will be launching sometime this year.
Yeah,
and it's essentially like guys that were once human but have mastered biological engineering to the point where they no longer appear or look human in any discernible shape or form, and they kind of look like, I would say, sort of a humanoid version of Tyranids from 40K.
Oh, okay. So it's not like cyberpunk technology and humans married. It's more like bio.
It's all biological. They have no mechanical stuff to them. They've just mastered it. And they have mastered the ability to have builder mites, which are microscopic things that can sort of like fly around and build biological matter. So as long as it's simple enough, they're able to build things right on the battlefield. So they have their own guys, which are these towering, 10-foot giant troopers. And then they can sort of summon what we call thrall units, which are kind of like, little critters that are easy for them to build and fulfill a certain function. And so the play style for them is going to be, you have your big guys, which move around really slowly, very slow, but hit hard. And then they can summon all these thrall units to instantly go out and do whatever little bidding they need. So, as the opponent, you can try to wipe out the big guys to stop the spawning. But if you don't, then they can spawn in their little critters and then do all sorts of crazy stuff. So
that sounds cool too. I can't wait to see those guys. That's fantastic. And those are coming out. When do you think is that sometime this year? Do you have a date?
Hopefully earlier in the year, but could be by the end of the year, but it should be this year. We've got the models pretty much ready. So it's just about putting them into the production line.
Well, it's exciting to see the game being so well supported. So speaking of all that, so now you guys are working on version 2. I know you mentioned to me there's like a public beta. Is it underway now currently? Is that what's happening right now?
It is currently underway until the end of February is the target right now. So
awesome.
We are desperately looking for anyone to come and give us feedback because, I'll be honest here that, with the original, our pace of release, of models, it doesn't have that same sort of excitement that you get in other with other games. So that is, I think we do have our fans out there that play the game, but they're not sort of like the very vocal, super active people. And so we need anyone who's willing to even just download the rules and read them, or, play a solo game with proxy models, or rope a friend in and give one game in to come and give us feedback in the next month. It would just be incredibly valuable. So if anyone is willing to do that, we'll give that info out later where they can.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of these rules you guys are designing, because I think they are really interesting. And as a game mechanics guy myself, as I was reading through these, like, man, I got to play a test game of this myself and give you guys some feedback, just because the direction sounds really cool. And a lot of the thoughts going into this seem really cool. And so I was looking at sort of the summary you guys have posted over there on dakadaka.com. And one of the things I noticed, you right off the bat, like the very first thing you sort of talked about as one of the goals of version 2 is sort of this idea of simplified unit actions. Like, what does that mean? What are unit actions, and sort of what are some of the things you're trying to streamline as you go through this?
Right. So in version 1, we had sort of like full unit actions. They were like, move and shoot was one action. So you would move and shoot, and then you had like a dash, which would be a big move, but you'd shoot less accurately, and so on and so forth. All the units were bundled together, and that did make it harder for people to remember what every action did, because there were always a few exceptions in each one. So with this one, we went back to which a lot of games have done. Just have each action be a very simple thing. A move or a dash is just two different kinds of move, and then you have, you can go take cover or be on the move, which gives you some extra bonuses, or aim, and then you can shoot. And you do a total of 3 actions. And there are some limitations. It's not like some games where you're able to like just shoot twice if you want. You can do a maximum of 1 movement, maximum of 1 shooting, and then you can do up to the 2 of the status actions, which are the aim or take cover or on the move actions.
Nice. So the goal there is just to make it really simple, like where your choices are each round for each unit, right?
It's just, the goal is to make it so it's easy to remember what those actions do, because they're in bite-sized chunks.
Got it. So then the next one, and that sounds good to me, right? Because you want to have variety, which is great, and a lot of those actions sound like they had a lot of interesting tactical choices. But you obviously want to make it so that people can just off the top of their head remember what their 2 or 3 options are, right, or 5 options, or whatever they are. So now my favorite topic is suppression, and I love the title of this rule change: suppression that matters. I'm using air quotes. None of you can see this. So what does suppression that matters mean? Like, what are some of the things you learned about your current suppression rules, and how are you iterating on them?
So in version 1, I for the Kickstarter, I was in love with the blast markers from Epic back in the day. We had these little cardboard blast markers. And so I love the visual aspect of that, of just seeing like which units are totally suppressed. And so unfortunately, part of trying to get the whole dice roll system unified back in version 1, we went with like a thing where every time you got suppression, you put another little marker out. And we did have different markers that would represent like, 1, 3, and 5, but you would have just tons and tons and tons of suppression on units. And the only thing it would ever do was make them fail their activation test, which would make them perform a lesser action. It wouldn't actually have like serious consequences. So there were certainly games where you would just pile suppression on a unit and it wouldn't really accomplish anything, which is not how it should be, obviously. So for version 2, we wanted to make, suppression a viable mechanic, a way to win, as well as making it super impactful. And the obvious way to do that was just, let's go back and make there only be like 6 suppression levels, which can be perfectly represented by a die. So we lose the little blast markers, unless people want to like make their own custom, blast markers that say 1 through 6. They can do that too. But, it's easy to mark. And then, of course, the key is not only does that suppression, rather than it just affecting a test at the beginning of the activation, it now affects, the unit's ability to take cover, the unit's ability to shoot. And if you get every time you raise your suppression level past 6, you now take an injury. So you can totally suppress a unit to death, which I think is what you really do need for a suppression mechanic. And it allows you to like hit those super big units that are hard to damage. Otherwise, you can just suppress them. And one action that we do have is called suppressive fire. So it's a different mode of shooting. You have your regular shooting, which causes damage, and then you have suppressive fire, which uses a slightly different simplified set of mechanics. And you can add extra suppression. And so if your own unit is really suppressed, your shooting is going to be crap, but you can always do suppressive fire. That doesn't get affected at all by suppression. So your guys just whip out their guns and start firing back. And so you always have an option, even if your unit's heavily suppressed, you can use suppressive fire and try to, suppress the enemy back.
Love it. I like that a lot. I love the idea that suppression eventually, air quotes, kills people, really makes them run away, right? They're just exactly in terror. One bit of feedback, as I was reading this, I noticed that you did make a note in the docs there. Now you chose the 6 levels of suppression so you could track it with a D6. One thing I've noticed whenever you track status with dice, especially if it's the same kind of dice that you roll, is you have a tendency to always pick up the dice, by accident, because you're like going to roll and you pick it up. So I would just have people or recommend people use an oversized D6 for that, or a different colored D6, or some kind of way to really get a visual on that.
So there's a lot of great alternatives. If you have the blast markers from the original Kickstarter, you can, write a little number on the side, 1 through 6.
There you go.
You can use a different color die, and we are coming out with new plastic starter sets for each faction. Mm-hmm. So rather than have a single box that has 2 factions, we will be putting out sometime this year a faction starter kit for each faction. And in there we are producing plastic tokens.
Nice for suppression. Awesome.
Suppression as well as every other effect in the game. So you get.
Nice. Cool.
And they're really, really cool because they're plastic. So they're 3D modeled and they take paint really well. So it's really cool.
I'm excited. When are those coming out? I'm excited for those.
That'll be out this year. I don't know if we're going to sell them separately yet, but I know they're coming in each of the faction starter sets.
Got it. Oh, awesome. Well, I'm going to keep an eye on that now. Fantastic. So the next thing you guys talked about a little bit online was the new dice engine. So it's still D6s, I hope. I mean, obviously for the name of the show, if it's not D6s, I don't know what'll have you on here, quite frankly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a big proponent of D6s, even though I know that they dramatically limit your game design, but I just think that they are obviously easier to find. They're not as daunting to non-gamers. Not that this game is really aimed at non-gamers, but I think they're more satisfying to roll. I always have. So that, we stuck with D6s in the original game, and I thought that we could try to find a way to make it work. And so I think our new engine is pretty unique. I don't want to say anything is brand new, because there's always somebody out there that's done a mechanic before. But essentially, you're just rolling against the target's stat and trying to equal or beat it. So let's just take the hit roll, for example. The target's evasion is either going to be 3, 4, or 5, meaning you need to roll higher than a 3 or more, a 4 or more, or a 5 or more. The standard's going to be a 4 or more. If it's a quick, hard to hit unit, it's going to be a 5. And if it's a slow, lumbering, big unit, it's going to be a 3. So you're just rolling against that with all your dice. And then what's different is the skill of your unit firing just represents the number of times you can modify those rolls. So if you have like a skill of 4, you can take 4 different dice and flip them over one better for 4 of them. So say you roll 4 3s, you can flip those all to 4 4s and now have 4 hits. Or you can take 1 die and you can kick it up by 2 and another 2 dice by 1, just whatever you need to sort of kick up your hits.
That's awesome. So your unit's skill is basically luck mitigation.
Exactly. So it kind of combines it. I know that you are a big fan of having mechanics that sort of like give you help out in bad luck. And so this has the thing where it's sort of like built-in luck and also the core mechanic at the same time. So it sort of like melds it together.
I love it.
And the last piece of that's very important is there are critical hits, which is a roll of a 6 or a 1. A 1 is a critical miss, a 6 is a critical hit. And in order to use these dice flips, as we call them, you need to use an extra 1 to either get out of the critical miss or to get into the critical hit. So if you roll a 5, for example, and you want to get up to the critical hit, you got to spend 2 of your dice flips in order to get there. And you say, well, why would you want the critical hit? Well, there's a lot of weapons that have critical hit abilities. So, they trigger extra hits or all sorts of cool effects. And then even if your weapon has no special critical hit to it, you can always use the base one, which is called a perfect strike. And that means that the opponent can't block that with their armor unless they also roll a critical on their armor roll. And it can't be blocked by cover or field or dodge or anything. It basically becomes a unblockable hit unless you roll that 6 on the armor roll. So that's always useful to get your hits up to a critical.
Got it.
And so really quick, so you roll your hits and then you use your dice flips to modify your dice rolls to get how many hits you have. And then your opponent is going to roll against their armor rolls, and that's just rolled against the penetration of the weapon. So penetration could be anywhere from 2 to 6. And again, you're trying to equal or beat that to make your armor roll. And then you have an armor characteristic, which gives you a number of dice flips as the opposing player, which you can then modify up to try to block more of the hits.
Nice.
So
I like the simplicity of it, but I also like that it engages both players, right? So the
Correct.
defending players watching carefully and also thinking about how to distribute those armor points as he or she is saving. So I like that a lot. That's really cool. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I think it's really important in this day and age to have both players involved in each roll to hit and damage, because that way you stay engaged rather than, we have alternating activation. So it's not like it's like 40K where you're spending a whole turn sitting and watching someone. But even then, it's nice to be involved in every single dice roll.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's fantastic. So the dice engine sounds really cool to me. Actually, I do think the idea that units have these little points they can spend for adjusting the numbers is pretty slick. That's awesome. So the next topic you guys had in there is you're also trying to make the game even more lethal. So are people just not dying, or do you just want it to be a little more scary out there on the battlefield?
Yeah, no, people were not dying. I mean, that was sort of again. We have you have goals, and we made the rules in the first version to meet those goals. But then you realize after the fact that maybe the goal wasn't so great. And the idea in the first game is you're playing with such a small force of so few models that you kind of don't want to have everything just evaporate. So we made between the cover mechanic and models themselves were really, really durable in the first one. So you would have rounds of shooting where all you were doing was adding suppression and not actually killing anything. And with suppression not actually killing models, that wasn't that huge a penalty. And so that was a huge point of feedback that we got was, you play many rounds and not see anyone die, and it was just not exciting enough. And that was by design, but it was the wrong design, I think, in hindsight. So we are certainly have changed that now. And not only are models easier to kill in general, but now, as we mentioned before, suppression can kill people. So you see models dying at the right rate that feels correct. And one of the things, from the beginning, the first version and this version has a mechanic to bring back units into play as reinforcements. So it's like once you have that mechanic, you don't really need to worry about,
wiping emotes,
models getting killed all that much. So, you just have to accept like, okay, these things are going to happen. And it's in the play test that we've had, it feels right, feels good. And it's much more satisfying from a lethality point of view. So if anyone played and thought that was a problem with the first edition, I think you should definitely give these beta rules a try and see it.
Nice. That sounds cool. You want to have, there's nothing more frustrating than having a really good attack roll and a really good moment, or setting up a really good kill box and then not having anything really happen. So I think that's important.
Right.
Awesome. And then the last sort of category is just a bunch of little quality of life improvements. So what are some of the other little things you guys are looking at to just kind of make the game a little more approachable and fun?
Oh, I'll have to go look at that really quick. You want to read them out to me?
I didn't list them all in here, but
okay,
there's probably lots of cool quality.
Hold on. I got them. Here we go.
He's got
all righty.
I surprised you, John. I'll take a bonus.
So we just did things like in the original we had a lot of like special rules. Like every weapon profile had like 5 special rules. And one of the reasons that happened is because we tried to like condense the profile of weapons and profile of characteristics down to the absolute minimum we could to quote unquote save space. But, in reality, all your information is going to go somewhere in a game. So if you take down the characteristics, it's going to go into special rules. And that I think, is a learning experience. And so we've gone ahead and we've expanded a few characteristics, both on the model profile and on the weapon profile. And that's allowed to cut down on special rules. And I think that's a good thing. We've also, in weapons, we've just clarified sort of like very common special rules, like area of effect, that there's lots and lots of weapons that use it, because, the hope is that those special rules should be easy enough for players to memorize once they've played a few games. And then you have your truly, unique special rules that are on the unit entry. That'll, all the rules are now on the unit entry, all the special abilities. So you can just like look down and see what they are. So you shouldn't, if you have all the unit sheets printed out, you shouldn't have to look at the rule book almost at all.
Fantastic.
Let's see what else. Command points. They no longer have to be allocated to specific models. They just stay in a pool, in front of you, and then you use them as you want. We now have way more special abilities that can be triggered by command points. So before it was just, reinforcements and blocking reinforcements and lowering suppression was all that you could really do with command points. And now a lot of command models have special abilities that can use command points in order to trigger them. But if anyone is not a fan of like how much 40K uses command points and how many stratagems they have, don't worry, we're not going anywhere near that level of command point shenanigans. It's a very controlled pool of stuff you can use. We've simplified moving like a lot of other games have done, where you just move the squad leader and then you just move the rest of the models in coherency with a squad leader. And that speeds things up. We have added in version 1, like all the special rules from weapons, they would just sort of like be extra suppression. Like, if it was a flamethrower or whatever, it would all just boil down to extra suppression. And so we realized that was not very like exciting. And so we've certainly upped the amount of like cool little effects that different weapons can do. You can now set people on fire, which funny enough does add extra suppression, but you can confuse units, which takes down their amount of actions they can make. You can slow units, which reduces their movement, stuff like that just wasn't in the first game. And part of that plastic token set that we're selling is going to have tokens for all these, so people will have the tokens they need in order to mark their units for these kind of things.
Awesome. Well, that sounds fantastic. I think some of the suppression things will be more exciting now that it kills people, so that's always fun.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because then you get the visual now of the people burning to death, which is even better.
Right.
Not that people should burn to death unless it's a game. I'm excited about this. I can't wait to see these boxes. I can't wait to try out the new rules. I'm going to give them a go here. So I give you guys some feedback here. If folks want to help out, if they're excited, they want to kind of see the rules, get involved in the beta. How do they do that? Where should they go to kind of check all this out?
To download the rules, you want to go to maelstromsedge.com. And right on the homepage, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see a link for, or a little entry for the beta, and you can click on that and download. There's one rulebook PDF, and then there's a separate PDF for each faction, so you can download whichever ones you want to try out. And then in order to give us feedback, the best place is to go over to DACA, and it's free sign up. And if you don't want to go there and you have a Facebook profile, you can join our group. It's called the COM Guild, COMM Guild. Search for Maelstrom's Edge COM Guild on Facebook, and you'll find it. And it is a private group, but we accept everyone, so you can go join that and then give us feedback there too if you want. But I just implore anyone, please give us some feedback.
That's awesome. Now for version 2 coming out, how should people expect it to launch? Like, where should they be watching? Is there going to be a Kickstarter? Should they be watching their friendly local gaming store, some online stores for the new stuff, or just maelstromsedge.com? Or how can we expect this thing to sort of hit the streets?
Well, so we are a small company. Let me just say really quick, like, one of the reasons that we're still around from 2016 to now is because we have a company structure where, none of us works 100% full time on Maelstrom's Edge. We don't have an office or anything like that. We all work from wherever we are in the world, and we have, warehouse and stuff like that. But that has allowed us to keep trucking for this long with no end in sight, because we don't need huge profits. We don't have any licensing fees. We don't have anything like that. So the great thing about Maelstrom's Edge is that there's no reason that it should ever stop. It doesn't kick out the releases maybe that some other games do, but it can truck along. It can be your sort of like fun second game or whatever. So you can have confidence that if you get in Maelstrom's Edge, that it'll still be there, and you can just keep your army for a rainy day and play it every few months and when a new unit comes out and enjoy it. So, but that does mean we are not, in every store. That we have been in some retailers, especially in the UK. But for the most part, you can find us out on our own website, maelstromsedge.com. And if you want to be notified of stuff, you can join our Facebook group, or you can visit DACA and check out our Maelstrom's Edge forum there.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing with everyone all the hard work and excitement. Really, I'm very excited about Maelstrom's Edge 2.0. And again, if people want to leave that feedback, get involved. Go to the groups that John discussed over at the Com Guild, or on DACA.com, or just check out maelstromsedge.com, and I'm sure you can find all the links there. So, John, thank you for joining us today, and thanks again for sharing all that great information.
Thank you so much, Russ. It was a pleasure. Great to talk to you again.
Good to chat with you, John. Take care now.
All right. Bye-bye.
Achievement unlocked. You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@thed6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.